Bad Habits.
Welcome, everybody, to the Bad Habits podcast. My name is Brendan McGuire, and today's guest, heavyweight boxing contender, Kirk Johnson. Today, we're going to be talking about racism, what it's like to be a successful black man, not just in Canada, but also the United States. So before we jump into the interview, just a few thoughts for me. I want to thank Kirk for being so open and honest during this interview. I think Kirk thought that most of this interview was going to be about boxing, but in fact, we really dove into what it's like to be black in Canada. And we also talked about the differences between Canada and the United States, because for those of you who don't know, Kirk lives half his time in Texas and the other half of his time here in Canada, in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. We as Canadians like to think that, there's a big difference between us and the United States. And as you'll hear from this interview, it's not as big a difference as you may think. So Kirk really dives into what it's like growing up black in Nova Scotia. He talks about some of the stories and some of the incidences that he had to deal with as a youth growing up that, believe it or not, continued all the way up until his adulthood. So Kirk became a very famous Canadian. He fought one of the Klitschko brothers. He fought for the heavyweight championship of the world. The entire country was cheering for him. Yet when he came home, he faced some really deep-seated racism. I've known Kirk for a while, so one of the first things you notice when you meet Kirk Johnson is the size of his hands and how big he is. He's a heavyweight fighter. But when you sit down and you have a conversation with Kirk, he quickly breaks down the stereotypes of what a quote-unquote fighter is. Kirk is a very nice individual. He's easily approachable, and he's smart. He doesn't seem to have a violent streak in him. And in fact, if I was to describe Kirk Johnson, one of the first words I would say is patience. And Kirk has shown a lot of patience in his life, not just in his career, but some of the things that he ran into outside of the boxing ring. So we really dive into what it's like to be black in Nova Scotia, the street checks. Kirk was street checked dozens and dozens and dozens of times over a short period. We dive into that. So thank you, Kirk, for taking the time to sit down with me. It was a huge learning experience. It was very eye-opening for me because you really start to see what it's like. You start to see what it's like through his eyes to be black in Nova Scotia and how you're treated. I hope that this will open people's eyes. It'll break down the stereotypes, and it will help people in some small way understand racism and the impact that it has on individuals. And if someone like Kirk Johnson, who's over 6 feet tall, who is someone that has fought some of the biggest, baddest men in the world, who's extremely successful, if Kirk is facing racism at home on a daily basis, and people know who he is, and he's famous, then what does that say for everybody? If Kirk is facing that, then what hope does anyone else have? What hope does anyone else have? Put yourself in the shoes of a young black man or woman who doesn't have the fame, who doesn't have the fortune, who doesn't have the reputation of Kirk Johnson. If someone asked me today to describe Kirk Johnson, I would describe Kirk as nice, approachable, smart, and family. And that's what I got out of this interview. What I got out of this interview was, for some people, the color of your skin matters. For some people, but it shouldn't. Kirk Johnson, if you take away Kirk's accomplishments in the ring and look at Kirk as a husband, as a father, as a man, not as a boxer, Kirk is everything we should all strive to be. Family first, community first, a loving husband, smart, patient. In the face of adversity, Kirk has shown patience unlike anything I've ever heard of. He's an incredible individual. It was an honor to sit down with him. If somebody like that had to put up with the racism, then what hope do we have? Society would be better with more Kirk Johnsons, not less. The overwhelming feeling that I felt after this interview was, this next part of his life will be even more important. Take a moment and walk a mile in someone else's shoes and try to experience what he experienced. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Brendan McGuire. Welcome to the Bad Habits Podcast. Today I'm joined here with heavyweight boxer Kirk Johnson. Good to see you, Kirk.
Good to see you, too. I'm glad to be on the show.
I'm just going to dive into a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about boxing, but we're going to talk about how almost accidentally you became a black social figure here in Nova Scotia because of the circumstances that were presented to you.
In that way, I guess so. But,
yeah.
I always had it ahead of me in the first place. I mean, my father, he talked about it all his life, and he explained to us that he was doing this hoping that one day we wouldn't go through some of the same things he went through, and unfortunately, that's what happened with me.
Before we started, I heard you say the first time you ever put on a pair of gloves was when?
I'm going to say I was 10 years old.
Instantly fell in love with the sport, or did it take a while?
I like the sport, but when everybody say you gotta love the sport, I guess because I sacrificed so much, I guess it's the love of it. But if I'm not around the sport, it's not the thing of, I'm dying to be into the game or whatever. So, yeah, I love the sport a little bit, I guess.
How would you explain to somebody that doesn't box or has never boxed why you box?
Well, the only thing I can say, I never was asked this question before, but to me, it's like wrestling. You try to submit the guy and get the 3 count.
Yeah.
In boxing, we try to hit the guy to get the 10 count, but I can't lie. It's totally different than street fighting. It's not personal at all. I mean, we could yell and ramp and rave before the fight to try to get in the guy's head, but right afterwards, it's a big relief. Whether you win or lose, it's a big relief of, you know what, it's over now. Hey, I respect you, you respect me, and it's over and done with right now. But when it comes to our street fight, that's something personal. Like, you guys fight, win or loser, and it seems like you almost hate each other. But boxing's totally different.
I mean, you've been in some of the biggest fights, definitely in Canadian history, but you fought some of the biggest, baddest men on the planet. You look at Vitaly Klitschko.
Yeah, one of the great fighters.
Yeah, Oleg Moskayev, who at the time I think had just finished knocking out Rockman, was it?
Yes, it was, yeah. Kushner's promotion, and we were signed with the same guy. And everybody on the Kushner promotion was shaking my hand, saying, Kirk, you're a nice guy, man. Too bad this has to be the way it is right now.
There's billions of people on this planet,
yeah,
and very few people have been able to do what you've done at such a high level. So you've literally fought for the heavyweight championship of the world. What is that feeling coming from the locker room to the ring?
I'm a little different than a lot of people. Certain things I don't really see it as being different. When I fought down here when I was 10 years old, all my amateur career or what have you, when we walked to the ring, it just a walk. It just like, let me hurry up and get to the ring and get this on with. And when I walked that long walk up for the world championship, and when I fought Klitschko, I felt the same way. It didn't feel no different. It just that the walk was a lot longer, and the people cheered a lot louder. But other than that, it felt no different. It just, I just couldn't wait to go fight.
So you grew up in North Preston?
I grew up in Dartmouth.
Dartmouth?
And I stayed. I went to North Preston when I was 6 until 8, 2 to 2.5 years. But for the most of my life, I grew up in Dartmouth.
How would you describe your upbringing?
Well, it was a good upbringing because I have a great mother and a great father. They're still together right now, and they're still great right now. My father, growing up in Dartmouth, I can't lie to you. I went through a racist act when I was at the age of probably 4 to 4.5. I was in an apartment building, and these kids wrote on the wall, and they said, "Oh, he wrote on the wall." And then the 2 landlords, they stopped me in my tracks. The husband and wife stopped me and had a hot water with the sponges there and made me wipe the walls down and didn't get no permission from my mother or father. My mother was looking for me at the apartment, and she finally found me. She sent me to home, and she wiped down the walls. And after that, it was a big argument, and we moved out. But that was one of the first acts of racism that I experienced in going to school. When we first went to school here, I experienced, going to school, being the only blacks there. Me and my brother, we had it kind of rough. They were bullying us all the time, had us, especially with me, had me in the circle, had me on my knees. Guys would make me get on my knees. I'm only one guy, so I had to get on my knees, and just be there. And I didn't like it, but I'm 5 years old, my first year in school. I'll never forget that. So it was a few things that happened to me that when I was young, I was saying, I can't wait till I get older. So I got older and things started to happen.
5 years old, did you know that was because of the color of your skin?
You know what? Yeah, I did, because they were talking about my skin color. Oh, that's the black guy over there. You know, they're half monkeys. So yeah, I did.
How do you compartmentalize that? Like, how do you get up the next day and go to school?
I was scared, but I had to go to school. You know, I just had to go to school. I mean, my parents said we had to go to school, so we went to school, and that's what it was. And then at the same time that went down, you got to understand, then you got a bunch of white people around you that wants to be your friend. And that's the part that made it easier. So it wasn't all. It was a handful of people talking about he's that black kid over there, but the majority of the school was nice.
So it's interesting because I never thought of that until you just said this, but you have a bunch of white kids that are overtly racist to you. How do you look at other white kids and think they're not racist?
Because you got to understand, if there were 2 or 3 being racist towards me, and then you got a bunch of them being nice to you, you know, these guys being rude and saying disturbing things, then all the rest of them, when I go into my class, whatever, everybody's being nice. So it wasn't a problem.
10 years old, you put on gloves. You decide to box. Obviously, you've gone on to have a very successful career. One of the better careers of a Canadian boxer maybe ever. You're definitely up there. You've reached some heights that people could only dream of. We touched earlier about some of the baddest men on earth that you got in the ring with,
right?
And that obviously is a challenge in itself. But then I would argue that your biggest challenge was when you came home and what you faced from the local authorities and from individuals. You've had an incredible career as a boxer, but I think this next part is as important, if not more important, for young African Nova Scotians and young black kids all over the place. Because, well, I'll let you explain.
Well, when you say come home, at the time I was undefeated. I mean, we got the verdict in 2003. That's when the case came out, and I won the case in 2003. But it started in 98.
So 1998, what started?
I was driving down Main Street, and me and my cousin, and the police car spotted us, and he zoomed up right beside us, and I remember him looking over, and I'm the passenger of my own car. Cousin is driving, and I'm the passenger, and me and the police officer, we make eye contact, and he did this. We're looking at each other, and then from there, he made a dead stop and got behind us. And my cousin said, yep, he's going to follow us. I said, yeah, that's cool. Who cares? And we just kept driving. We took the loop back around to get back on Main Street and came up by Tim Hortons and pulled over in the Tim Hortons because it was people in Tim Hortons. And we wasn't going to pull over anywhere dark.
You want witnesses.
Yeah. So I had these shiny rims on my car. And then when we pulled over, a few of my cousins just so happened to see the car from the road. And they pulled over, and a bunch of guys pulled over, and we're talking to the police. He said, well, I'm taking your car. I mean, he didn't say it right away. We're talking, I give my registration. It was on my window, and I give my license and my insurance. He didn't accept it. He said, no, you guys got a green card here for the insurance?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, my insurance ain't no green card. Is
yeah.
You know. And I said, well, this is my insurance. He said, that's not insurance. It needs to be green like Nova Scotia. I said, well, my car is registered in Texas, and I just came home to see my parents. And he said, well, I'm not accepting it. It went on for a whole hour. I mean, by the time that night, it was 13 police cars there. And we found out later that in the city that night, it was 16 cars on duty. And my lawyer said in court, he said, you mean tell me you got 13 cars on Kirk Johnson and only 3 other cars to protect the whole Bedford, Sackville, Halifax, Dartmouth area. And we were talking back and forth. I said, man, listen, this is my stuff. Once you call in, all my stuff will work out. He just kept saying, I'm taking your car. And I just told myself, listen, I don't want no trouble. I talked to all the other police officers, and everybody knew me. They knew me by how you doing, Kirk Johnson? When is your next fight? I was saying, well, I'm fighting right now. I said, this is my next fight right now, and you guys got to stop this because I ain't did nothing wrong. Every officer said he's an officer on duty. I said, but do you let the officer on duty do something wrong? So I talked to everybody the right way, but nobody went for it. So he took the car, and I said, you know what? I'm going to see you in court. I don't care how long it takes. I will see you in court.
What came about was the idea of a street check.
Well,
and so for people that don't know, what is a street check?
I'm not 100% sure of everything other than I know when I was driving, they can pull you over and check your license and insurance, and apparently that's a part of the street check. And I heard a part of the other street check is if you're walking anywhere, the police can pull you over and ask for your ID and street check you that way also.
How many times were you pulled over
that
you can remember?
That I can remember. If I had all day to sit here with you, I can tell you about probably 50 different times. My cousins used to drive my car on a regular basis also. They've been pulled over 15, 20 times themselves. Matter of fact, on the police record, I didn't know this because I got two different cousins that drove my car. So I can have one cousin drive my car around 8 to 12, and the next one drive 12, whatever. Anyway, on the police record, it showed that my car was stopped three times in one day.
3 times in one day?
3 times in one day.
And the explanation for that was what?
I don't know, because at the time that it went down, I probably got stopped once that day myself, and my other cousin probably got stopped once, him one and him one, probably. I don't know. But all I know, it got like when the police brought their record into court, their record showed that they stopped my car 3 times in one day.
How frustrating is it to be pulled over? So I'll be honest with you, I've probably been pulled over once in my life. Once in my life.
Wow.
And I'm not joking. I'm in the Spryfield area, and my wife at the time was my girlfriend, and I wanted to give her a tour of Spryfield. We drove up by the high school about 10 o'clock at night.
Right. Cop
pulled over and said, what are you doing up here? And I said, I'm just giving girlfriend a tour of the area. And he's like, all right, go on. Right. And that was it. That's the only time I've ever been pulled over in my life.
Wow.
So you've been pulled over 50 times.
How old are you?
I'm 44.
And you've been pulled over one time in your life?
Once.
Unless you're forgetting something.
Once.
Wow.
Once. Unless you go through like a street, when that don't count, right? But just like a cop flick his lights and pull me over once in my life at 44 years old.
Wow.
So
that's in my community, North Pleasant.
Yeah,
that's not heard of.
Is it fair to say that people were getting pulled over in North Preston, which for people that don't know is a predominantly black community, right?
Yeah, it's on a regular basis. I mean,
when you say regular basis, would it be fair to say that you know people that were pulled over weekly?
Of course. I mean, if you were to go up there right now and even say that you're 44 years old and you were pulled over once in your life, even the probably 18, 19-year-old look at you and say, what? Nah, you had to have been put over more than that. I mean, that's the life for us. We had,
So how do you? So what I want to get at with this stuff, because it really pushed you into, from a provincial and a national standpoint, this became national news, and this definitely was a big contentious issue in the province. And because of your efforts, there was regulation changes. Right. Because of your case, there was regulation changes. There are people out there that will say racism doesn't exist.
Well, those people.
What do you say to them?
Those are the racist people. Yeah. How could you say racism don't exist? First and foremost, 450 years of slavery, that wasn't racist. Then after that, you have segregation. That wasn't racist. Segregation was black drink water fountain and a white water fountain, black washroom and a white washroom. When you went to the white washroom, it was proper, decent, clean. Went to the black one, it was filthy, dirty. The water didn't taste right. Like we weren't allowed in the front of the bus. Young women had to get up for for young white men or whatever kids me. So that's back then racism. And then how do we get these records? Like, we're in jail more than the white person in jail. We have more traffic tickets than the white person. That's because if you ignore this side and always go after this side, how is that not racism? You just have a mechanism that, okay, I'm going to ignore these white guys going by, but, oh, this black guy, I got to go get him. Racism exists, and racism, I don't want to say it's always going to exist, but the way it looks is going to exist.
Yeah.
Going to school, my father and uncles always warned me about when you go to school, what they're going to try to do, they're going to take you in this room and try to convince you that you can't go to university, and they're going to get you to sign this piece of paper and say that you're going to take all general courses coming from elementary. My wife went through it. She have a business degree.
Yeah.
She went through it. I went through it.
How old are you, Kirk?
I'm 47. This is what we went through. My younger brother, who's 40, he's 45. He went through it. Like, these were the things in the school system that we went through. So my father said, do not sign for general. Always take academic, because general you can't get in university. Right. So take academic. So he just said it to us, hoping that they won't do the same thing. Sure enough, I was going to elementary to high school. I get called. Kirk Johnson, come down to the office. So I go to the office. Now the counselor or whoever is talking to me, and they say, well, you're not university quality. You should take all general. You'll get into high school if you take all general. This and that there, another. So I went through it. All my friends said, oh, yeah, did they talk to you yet? I said, yeah, they talked to me, but I'm not taking general because my father said, don't go for no general, this and that there. All of us went through that.
So you and I are basically the same age. I'm turning 45 this year. 2-year age difference. Yeah. Never heard of this in my life.
You never heard?
Never heard of that in my life.
So
I've never been pulled in. And so, in fairness, it took me 4.5 years to get through high school. I was a foster kid. I lived on the street for a while, went through group homes, Phoenix House, places like that. And a lot of times when people would look at me, they'd kind of look at me as like just a little, there's a foster kid, whatever, right?
Of course.
Not going to amount to anything.
Right.
But still, having said all that, I was never pulled into an office and said, general academic.
Oh, yeah.
It's the first time I've ever heard of it was through you.
What?
First time.
Okay. I mean, my father was up on it, and the thing about it, they didn't tell my parents that they were doing this. And my father knew, and because they were used to it, that was their way. So now that I'm older, I'm saying to myself, you can never pull my kids over and give them the decision to take general or academic. Like if they're coming from elementary to junior high, you couldn't get them to do that.
So back to the street checks. At what point did you at what point were you like, enough is enough?
Well,
like how do you go through knowing that almost every single time you get in a car, you're going to get pulled over? How do you stay cool?
See, my thing was, you got to understand, I didn't work.
Right.
My work was my boxing.
Right.
When I came home, I was on vacation. So it was like, I don't have to rest or work or nothing like that. Fortunately, at that time, my girlfriend, which is my wife right now, when I was taking her to work in the morning time, we didn't get pulled over. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So I was able to take her to work and bring her home for work, and nobody pulled me over to make her late for work. I'm pretty sure if it would have been like that, I'd have been upset. But I was saying, what? I ain't got nowhere to be, so, hey, if they pull me over, as long as I get to go where I go, I'm okay with it. But the breaking point was that night when badge number 454, Michael Sanford, stopped me and was super rude, super uncourteous, disrespectful. When I was walking to him keep on showing the paper, said, man, listen, all the stuff you're talking about is right here. Is the 1-800 number that it even says, if a peace officer want the information, call this number. And I was trying to show him, he just kept turning his back to me, like trying to upset me. That was cool. I said, you know what? This is not going to go away. I said, if you take my car, you and I are going to see each other in court. I don't care how long it takes me. That's just the confidence I had. And I said, you know what? The thing about it, I just finished fighting on HBO because I was like 20. I was undefeated. And I said, I just finished fighting on HBO. And I said, if I don't get justice this way, I said, I got no problem. HBO, I'm fighting on HBO probably in a couple months anyway. I just mentioned you guys on HBO on how ignorant and rude you guys are. That's what I said.
So this is something that just kind of popped in my head. There's a stereotype of a boxer, of a mixed martial artist, of somebody who makes their living with their fists, their feet, or whatnot, as a violent or dangerous person. Obviously, at the time, you're one of the top fighters in the world. You know, it's pretty remarkable to me. First of all, it shows your character, that you're able to go through all this stuff and not react, because I think most people would react in a different manner, especially having the tools that you have. Secondly, it really breaks down some of those stereotypes around the fighter, which is, you know, most people think they're loose cannons, or they're not smart, or they're just, you know, they're fighting because that's the only thing they can do. But you've kind of these things that you've gone through has proven your depth and your character, and has shown that fighting isn't just about your fist, it's also about your brain, and you were able to use that outside of the ring, which, like I said earlier, I think was one of your toughest fights.
Well, it was my longest fight, my toughest fight, and it's going to remain to be a fight because I have kids coming up, and my son, my daughter, and I don't want the same life. I don't want the same thing that happened to me to happen to them, but history already repeated itself. This type of stuff happened to my father, and then my father when I was 8 and 9 years old. This is when my father started telling us these stories at that age right there. So as a young kid coming up, stuff like that was already happening to us. Like when we were coming home, I used to complain to him that that's what they said about us, or they said that we're monkeys. We had this. I was in grade 2. And this young kid, he was my age, so grade 2, I think I was 8 years old or whatever. He was saying, he was always coming to class with some type of they said that black people are monkeys. They found these people these monkeys in Africa that's going to turn to him. Like he was always, every day he was always coming with something. And then the other white students would call and say, oh, Kirk, look what he said about black people. I said, okay, what'd you say about black people? And he said, oh, yeah, they proved that they come from monkeys, this and that there. I said, man, something was wrong with you. Like, stuff that I never, and he had glasses on, double glasses, like thick glasses, whatever. I'll never forget him. I don't know his name or whatever, but I'll never forget him. He was always coming up with, you guys are monkeys, you guys are part monkeys and stuff like that. And then when I got to junior high, one of the biology teachers, a super nice guy. And then I said to him, I said, it's not true that black people got weaker ankles than white people. That's why they don't play hockey. Then he said, oh, no, you know, some people got genetic situation where, you know, yes, black people ankles are more weaker than white people ankles. I said to myself, you gotta what you call it, skate on, and the skate go up like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, go past your ankle.
Yeah, to help your ankle. Then you got a boxer where we got these flimsy boots that don't help strengthen our ankles at all. We got to duck and move all around. I'm saying myself, I don't see no black people breaking their ankles over white people.
Basketball.
Exactly. So anyway, so then as years go on, I'm looking at the fact that they were saying that, but everybody in my community of North Preston, guess what we did on the pond? Like every weekend I was up there. We played hockey. We played ice hockey. And some of them were fantastic skaters, right?
Yeah.
Kept on playing ice hockey. And nobody's breaking their ankles or nothing like that. And then years later, years later, I had a cousin named Pokey Reddick.
Oh, yeah.
He was a Goldie.
Yeah.
And he was one of the first guys, black guy that was in the NHL or whatever, kissed me. But a lot of these stereotypes, and then when you have a few teachers go with the stereotype, and I told my father about it, what the biology teacher said. My father said that's just a stereotype they got of us. It's not true or whatever. And I knew it wasn't true anyway, because as I got older, I started to see stuff from what it really was, right?
So do you have these? So you have how many children?
Two.
Boy and girl?
Yeah, 15. The boy is 15 and the girl is 10.
So they've probably faced some adversity themselves.
My son is super quiet, but when he was in daycare, he heard the word nigger. He said, "Daddy, what does nigger mean?" I saw nigger was a name that they called us years ago because they didn't like us, they hated us. So that's a terrible name, a horrible name. Don't ever allow anybody to call you that name.
Have you had this discussion about racism? Because I know your father a bit, and I don't know him as well as most people, but I know that he's a strong personality.
Yeah.
He's a no-nonsense person, and I could see him having those conversations. Have you had the discussion about racism with your children?
Yeah, and my son heard some things and found out some things around his group area or whatever. And my daughter, she at the age of 10, she's starting to find out some things right now.
So I have 3 children, a boy 6, a daughter 5, and another daughter 3.
Right.
Oliver, Rafina, and Isla. Is it safe and fair to say that your children will face different challenges than mine because my children are white?
Yeah. I mean, if you didn't say it, it's unfair not to say it. I mean, right now, that's the reality of our life. Are we going to have a bad life? No, because I never had a bad life, but I had those things in my way. My kids are going to have certain things in their way.
More obstacles, you think?
Yeah. Do you call them more obstacles? I guess, yeah, I would say so. But they'll be able to deal with it because they got a father and a mother who dealt with that stuff before also. And it's like anything else. When you have adversities, you got to just find a way to deal with it. And they'll deal with it. They'll be all right.
Will it ever stop? That's the hope, right?
You know, I remember my father used to talk the exact same way. Well, when you guys get older, I don't want you guys to go through the same thing. Sure enough, we went through the same thing. Are they lynching us anymore? No. Are we in slavery anymore? No. But look how long it took us to get out of slavery, 400 to 450 years. And people say, why you talk about back then? Well, if you don't talk about back then, certain things will repeat itself. And whenever a person be racist to another person because of their color, and normally it's always on black, that's it repeating itself in a different way. Of course, it's not going to repeat itself in the exact way, but when you look at American TV and you see these people getting, the woman got shot in her own house while she was playing a video game with her 8-year-old nephew. Mm. Years ago, they lynched us by hanging us, right? Mm-hmm. That's a lynching. She was lynched for no reason at all.
And maybe it's just the way, you look at Colin Kaepernick, if that was Tom Brady.
Yeah. Donald Trump even, what president you hear talk that way about anybody? But anyway, he made a stand. And the stand was, the American anthem speaks about how we love America and how we are, how we brave, whatever. But yet, our people are getting killed all the time, and nobody's going to jail. Everybody is saying, "Well, I fear for my life." Like the guy who got shot in the back 8 times, and he was running from the cop. Boom, 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 boom. You see, the guy recorded it, and he's running from the cop, and the cop shoot him 8 times in the back, and then try to put a taser beside him. And then the guy said, "I feared for my life," and they get off with it.
Most people don't know, or most people may not know, that you split your time between Canada and the United States. And I think as Canadians, we like to think that we're not as bad when it comes to racism as the United States, or that racism doesn't exist the way it does in the United States. So you are living in Texas, yes, and you live in Halifax, 2 urban cores. Is there a difference? What's the difference?
When I first went to Texas in '93, it felt like it was different. Like the way the stores were, you can walk. It felt a little different because down there, I heard about drive-by shootings all the time and this, that, and other, and people shooting each other or whatever. Then 10, 15 years later, guess what? We got the same type of shooting here. 10 or 15 years later, we got cases of brutality that the police officers are doing. Like, it was my cousin named Peeny Frazier, where they tased him and threw him down and everything. That wasn't supposed to come here. And I'm looking at certain things in the USA, then when I come home, and it's quickly coming here. Unfortunately, when it comes to gun violence, you hear about guns all the time now up here, don't you?
Yeah.
Like the other day was something on Instagram about this cop doing something to this 14-year-old kid. We're catching up. Unfortunately, the same type of stuff that I hear down in Texas, it's actually coming on down here. And my barber was cutting my hair since '93. But 3 or 4 years ago, I just happened to walk in. Came from here. He said, "Yeah, man, I was telling everybody how safe Canada is and how you guys got up in Canada. Remember you were saying this?" I said, "Yeah." But I told you that 20 years ago. But right now, I said, we're almost the same as you guys right now.
And I would argue that you were probably, during all that street check stuff, you were probably treated worse at home than you were in Texas.
Well, I hadn't had that happen to me in Texas before. So far, yeah, I have to say yes.
So, and I'll start to wrap it up here, but how... So if you were being treated that way, if you were getting pulled over 50 times, why did you continue to come back?
Well, my mother and father, my wife, and my grandfather. So my family's here. Everybody I know, everybody I grew up with, everybody's here. So this is my life, right?
So what's next for Kirk Johnson? You gonna fight again?
Yep.
Are you? Do you got anyone? You in negotiations?
Well, right now I'm healing up. I had surgery, eye surgery. Doc said everything is coming well. Matter of fact, he released me a couple of weeks ago, and he said he don't want me to get hit for about another month, and I'll be okay. So if everything continues to go well, you'll see me do another year in the ring with 7 or 8 more fights.
Yeah.
If everything don't go well, just do what I've been doing, raising my kids and living my life.
One or two last questions about boxing.
Go right ahead.
Some of my favorite boxers of all time, I think of Meldrick Taylor, yes. Probably one of my favorite fighters of all time.
I've seen him.
But the reason I bring up people like Meldrick Taylor and Ali, obviously, is the CTE and the brain damage stuff. You're a bit different from those guys because I always said you were. This is for the boxing geeks. I always said you were Chris Bird with power. You could you could box. Like you could tell when you were in the ring, right. You had that good jab. You could tell you had the fundamentals just down pat. But you didn't take a lot of punishment. So that was one of the big things I found about you is that, some of those guys took a lot of punishment. And obviously they're starting to show. The two questions I had for you is, the longer you do this, does that weigh on your mind? And also, does the feeling of being or wanting to be a professional blank, so we'll say boxer in your case, or whatever professional sport, does that ever go away? Like, how do you get rid of that? The CTE stuff, the boxing stuff, I mean, does it worry you?
Well, when I first turned pro, I had a lot of people say, "Oh, Kirk, well, you can't box too long. You can't box, 27, 28, and then you're going to have to retire." They were saying stuff like that. And, oh, yeah, well, Ali got Parkinson. Everybody was showing me examples of Ali, and I met Meldrick Taylor when he was in that state. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And then I met all Sugar Ray Leonard and George Foreman and Holyfield. I met all the other guys. Mm-hmm. And my coach, Curtis Coates, is 82 going to 83. Mm-hmm. And Curtis had 88 professional fights. And them guys did 15 rounds.
Oh, yeah.
And Curtis didn't take a whole lot of punishment, but 88 fights is 88 fights. Mm-hmm. From when you see the way Curtis lived, how great he walked, how great he talked. Now, right now, he's 82 going to 83. He got dementia right now. Mm-hmm. But I can't lie. His dementia is doing better than I have a few uncles and aunts around here who had dementia earlier, like in their 70s, and they didn't do as good as he's doing right now. So when people say, "Oh, yeah, well, boxing does this to you and does that to you," I'm saying to myself, yeah, but I have an uncle and aunt who had dementia at an earlier stage. I have a cousin who died at the age of 51 because of MS, and his talking was gone because of MS. He never boxed a day in his life. So I saw so many people not box, but get these type of sicknesses and stuff like that, and they didn't go through no car accident or anything. They just got sick. And it's like, you know what, man, I'm not worried about that. I just got to live my life, and whatever happens in my life, happens in my life. And like I said, my cousin that died at 51, he was diagnosed with MS at probably 42, 43, and 4 years later, probably 47, 48, he was gone, like mentally. So when I look all around at these type of things in life, I just say, you know what, one day all of us are going to get sick. One day all of us are going to die and go. And you just got to live your life to the fullest and do the things that you feel you can do. And right now, while I'm training, I spar to young guys. I always get the best of them guys. So as long as I can do that, I'm good. If I get beat up, I got to retire. I mean, think about it. Boom, boom, I'm getting beat up. Somebody dropped me. It's like, you know what, man, this ain't for me. You know what I mean? So far. And, okay, Nigel Benn, you remember him?
Yeah, I do.
You know he was coming back. Last year he was coming back. His fight was scheduled.
Yeah.
And he was coming back.
Jeez, he's got to be
54.
I was going to say he's pretty old, yeah.
But everything was going great in training camp.
Yeah.
Then after a while, he was sparring. He got knocked out cold with this guy that he shouldn't have. And then he said, you know what? I realized that, man, it ain't for me. But he had a fight scheduled and everything about 4 or 5 months ago. But once he got knocked out cold, he said, hey, sometimes you need something to talk to you, and that talked to him, right? Now with George Foreman kept on going because he was reaching success. Bernard Hopkins kept going because of success, you know what I mean? So, you know.
So this will be the last question, and then we'll wrap her up. But so you're obviously, we could say, a Canadian icon. A lot of people know who you are. You've been successful. You said earlier that if you don't really need boxing at this point, you're doing it because you love it. And you still went through these street checks and this racist stuff, and you're Kirk freaking Johnson. They know who you are when they pull you over.
Yeah.
They knew who you were when they pulled you over. It was proved in a court of law that what they did was unconstitutional and was wrong. What do you say to somebody who's not Kirk Johnson, who is a youth that doesn't have that kind of power, that doesn't have that kind of drive, that doesn't have that kind of name recognition that you have to fight this, and the determination, and that your 15-year-old son? What do you say to a 15-year-old or 16-year-old or 17-year-old girl who gets pulled over?
I don't know, other than keep your cool. It's impossible to keep you cool in certain situations, but shut your mouth and keep you cool. Everything will be all right. Just keep you cool so nothing happens to you. Yeah, I talked to, down in Texas, I talked to a lot of guys. One guy had one of his kids killed because of street checks or whatever. And like I said, he tells his kids what to do all the time. When they come, keep your hands on the steering wheel. I don't know. I don't know the real answers.
You're going to keep advocating for black people, for the youth?
I have to. Like, when I say I have to, when Sanford did that to me, I didn't want to do all that. But when he did it to me, he forced me to defend myself and forced me to do what was right. And what was right is, I'm tired of you guys been harassing me the whole time I've been here, and you do it all the time. You're going to stop now. And that's what I had to do. And then I realized that, you know what, I was pulled into this. Maybe this is one of my callings. And my father talked about this all the time. I got to do it. I have to speak up and let the word be out here. And another thing that makes it easier, too, you got to understand. When you look at the Martin Luther King films, right, you see, when you look at the marches, you see when the police officers got the dogs going after people, did you realize you see a lot of white people being bitten by the dogs also? Because there's some people that go for right, not white. You understand? And they don't like to see a black person being beaten or bitten also, because to me, I really believe that we have more human beings that are loving and that love us than human beings that are racist towards us.
Honestly, Kirk, it's been an honor, pleasure to interview you and talk to you. Listen, I feel like the first chapter of your life, the boxing, was what defined you earlier, but I think this is the second chapter is going to be as, if not more important, buddy.
Yeah.
All right?
It will be, because you know what? I could be 85 years old doing this.
Thanks, buddy. Much appreciated.
Yep, thank you very much.